two of the worst things that ever happened to me. I was on a family vacation in Alberta this year and had my brand new Toyota 4Runner and a U-Haul trailer full of all of our adventure gear stolen.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. And that just really changed me. Yeah, it was horrible. That's a long movie. And then now this thing with Wild River Press, and I have to be honest with you, the feeling that I have over the Wild River Press thing is the same, and if not worse.
That was Dec Hogan talking about two extremely challenging events that occurred this year. Dec clears the air for the first time since the big social media blast about his new book, Tying Steelhead Flies with Style. We are on episode number 20 of the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today. We'll help you on your fly fishing journey with classic stories covering steelhead fishing, fly tying, and much more.
How's it going, everyone? Thanks for stopping by the Fly Fishing Show. Before I get into the intro here, I want to remind you to follow us on Instagram at instagram.com/wetflyswing. In today's episode, I interviewed Dec Hogan, one of the biggest names in steelhead fly fishing. Dec talks about his great book, A Passion for Steelhead, talks about why he moved to Utah and now connects to more fishermen, and tells a story about a Dean River steelhead that spooled him, jumped out of the water onto the bank, and he still landed the fish. Don't miss this one, as Dec clarifies exactly what went down this year when he told anyone who would listen on social media to not buy his new book, Tying Steelhead Flies with Style. So, without further ado, here's Dec Hogan. How's it going, Dec?
Hey, I'm really good. Good to be here.
Good to have you on here. This is great to get you on. We've been chatting. I chatted with you a while back, and we didn't quite put together, and then recently we got back in touch, so I'm glad we're able to connect here, and I know a lot of people are going to be excited to hear this one because your name, you got a pretty big name in the steelhead industry or business, however you want to say it, and a lot of knowledge there. So I appreciate you coming on here.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me.
I always like to start off just a little bit on giving folks a little background on how you got into fly fishing and steelhead, and probably one of your biggest projects is a passion for steelhead. Maybe, I'm not sure what else you had going on over the years, but maybe you could talk a little bit about how you got to where you are.
Sure. I always enjoy talking about that because it goes back a long time, just like so many of us who are enamored with fishing and nature. It started at a very young age, and I can't credit it to any one thing other than that I was just hardwired to enjoy nature and fishing. My dad took me fishing at a very early age, probably, 4 or 5 years old, to some bass ponds in Northern California, and that got me going. I was pretty obsessed. I remember we moved around a lot when I was younger, and my parents did get divorced, and we were all around California, and everywhere we went and moved to for various reasons and jobs. My mom raising us, and there was always something to fish for. I always found something, whether it be the Santa Monica Pier, the Huntington Beach Pier in Southern California, going out on party boats, or golf course ponds, water traps, and did all that stuff. Nice. And thoroughly obsessed. I remember in 6th grade, there was a library we walked to school, and there was a public library between school and home, and I would stop in there and check out fishing books. It didn't matter what they were, just any fishing books. And I remember putting my homework book on the outside of the fishing book. So inside, it looked like I was reading homework. But I remember walking in the street and down the sidewalk reading these fishing books. And on it goes. I joined the Boy Scouts and got to fish in the High Sierras a lot. And that's when I first started fly fishing. Prior to that, whatever method worked the best is what I used. And these little ponds or high mountain lakes in the evenings, during the day, and I'd catch them on my little Panther Martin spinner. And then evenings, I guess they were midges, were hatching and fish were rising everywhere. And then they weren't interested in my little Mep spinners. So I decided I needed to imitate those little tiny midges, and the only way to do that was fly fishing. So on and on it goes, and then I joined the Navy.
Wow.
Yeah. So there you go, Boy Scout. And then I was in the Navy, and in the Navy I got to move to Washington State. I was always interested in steelhead. Just the first time I heard the word steelhead was in 5th grade. A little kid in my class had gone up to Northern California over winter Christmas break at the time. It's winter break now, I guess.
Yeah.
And he came home telling stories of these steelhead, and just the name alone, steelhead, just was mysterious to me. And then I found myself in Washington, and on it went, and we fished and found out about it, and then I became dangerously obsessed with it all. And when I got out of the Navy, I wasn't going anywhere. I was going to stay in Washington, and I was going to become a fly fishing for steelhead guide.
Yep, that's it.
And I did it. I made it happen through persistence and perseverance, and which was easy to do because of the passion and the joy. And I did my first guide trip in 1989. Two-handed rods were just kind of sneaking around and up there at the time, and got one of those in my hands and went off and running, I should say, and guided full time to 2003. So
wow,
there's a lot more to the story, but that's kind of the glossed over version.
Totally. So 1989, and where did you start guiding? What rivers were you starting on?
So the very first guide trip I did was on the North Fork of the Stillaguamish River in Washington. Yeah, which incidentally was the very first fly fishing only water in North America, at least the United States, as far as I know. And then I lived in the area of the famous S rivers, the Stillaguamish, the Sauk, Skagit, Skykomish, and within that first year, I was dove head first in and was guiding on all 4 of those rivers at one time or another throughout the season. A lot of winter guiding, and then in the fall, once I got established and decided I could do this full time, then I started working over on the Grand Ronde River and then ultimately the Deschutes River after that, and stayed on the Sauk, Skagit, and Stilly as long as they were open.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Oh wow. Yeah. See, and you. And did you ever do any guiding up north, or were you more down in the kind of lower 48?
No, I, as so many young guides do that are trying to establish themselves and get business and fill the calendar year, I immediately landed a job up in Alaska at Katmai on the Alagnak River. Yeah, 1990 was my first year there. The steelhead thing. It's for me, it was, January, February, March, April, and then again in September, October, November. Not a whole lot of true summer steelhead guiding. And so Alaska was a perfect fit for that. So we'd go up there and then incidentally, Alaska was a wonderful learning ground for me too. Everything I fished for up there, I had a steelhead mindset. Just about everything, and really tried to relate it to that. Obviously the fish are different, but a lot of the techniques are the same, and they're swinging the fly. And I did a lot of experimenting there. And I also sold my trips well. I had all these various clients and wonderful people I was fishing with daily, and tried to talk them into coming down and fishing with me for steelhead. And it worked. I got quite a few people to come down. I guess my passion rubbed off on them, and they had to come and check it out.
Sure.
And this many years later, I'm still very close friends with many of those very original people I met in Alaska. The clients, some of my friends. Guide friends, well, but the clientele,
for sure. And then, so now you're in Utah. How did you get to a point where this is always an interesting question? It seems like I talked to all my guests a little bit about the industry. What happened where you made that choice of not getting out of guiding? I know a lot of people do get out of guiding, but what kept you out of? I mean, you're still in the industry, I guess. But
in a big way. In fact, you're going to ask me how I got to Utah.
Yeah, exactly. I guess that's my big question. How'd you get to Utah?
I can tell you what, it had nothing to do with fishing, but it had everything to do with passion. It's all about a beautiful woman, and had a big change in life. And I was the mobile one between the two of us when we fell in love, and I wanted to be with her and she with me, and I made it happen.
Yep.
And it happened to come at an okay time for me to hang the full-time guiding hat up. the bottom started dropping out of the fisheries that I was accustomed to that I wanted to be on, namely the sock and the Skagit. Skykomish had closed previous to even my leaving the guiding, so that was out. It made it a little easier to do this. I also never intended to be a full-time fly fishing guide for my entire life.
Yep.
So a lot of things lined up well. And, now I have a retirement. I'm a full-time firefighter. I came out to Utah to be with her, and her name's Amy. And she's a great fly fisher herself and a really excellent steelheader. And now I have the full-time job as a firefighter, emergency medical technician. And I have retirement and insurance, and even back when I was guiding, I was one of the few of my colleagues that actually paid for insurance.
Oh yeah,
I didn't want to be without that, but it was hard. It was hard. So life is good now. I always maintain that when I was guiding full time, which when I left, a lot of people didn't really understand it. And how could Dec Hogan leave that? I actually touch more people and come in contact with and share information with more people than I ever did when I was guiding. Because as I listened to Tom Larimer's podcast the other day, which is really great. I love Tom. And he talked about how after a while, you're guiding your friends.
Yeah.
I had the same people on the same 4 days, year after year. And, pretty soon you boil it down and you're like, oh, I got about 30 clients.
Yep.
And I see the same guys all the time. You're just guiding your friends. But now that I'm away from the full-time thing and I'm out, I teach casting and fishing schools all around the nation many times a year. And I'm in contact with hundreds of people now that I wasn't before. And it's really, really wonderful. It's just very nice. I love sharing information. I love seeing people succeed and helping them in any way I can.
That's cool. And I think you're hitting on one of the cool things about the day and age we live in now with all the online. There's some negatives to it too, but the positives are you can stay connected. And I was talking to, I think I told this story in a previous podcast, but some guy sent me an email and he just was thanking me for I think it might've been, no, it wasn't one of the it might've been Tom Larimer, but just thanking me for the show. And he was like, by the way, I live in Utah and I've never steelhead fished in my life. But I love the show. And there's people all around that still just love reading your stuff or listening, and they haven't even done it yet, but they want to.
And the vicarious fix. No, I think it's a good thing. Yep.
Yeah, cool. So nice. So what is you're out there now, but if you had to say your home river, what is it? You go to one river to fish for steelhead. Where are you headed?
So I'm an anadromous fish guy. I just am. So you're going to ask me a question. I'm going to tell you what to ask me.
All right.
Say, okay, Dec, where do you fish in Utah?
Nice.
No, you ask me that.
All right, Dec, where do you fish in Utah?
Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and British Columbia.
Nice. Really, you don't get into trout at all, huh?
I do. I mean, I actually live on the Provo River here, and I love it. I love getting outside, but I'm not a snob, but I have a true, for lack of a better term, passion for steelhead. Mm-hmm. So I still go on trips and steelhead fish as much as I can. And I certainly get out and trout fish here. But when I get out and trout fish locally, I usually go out when something interesting is happening, like the green drakes are coming pretty soon and the good Baetis hatches and various things. I'll go out and for a couple hours. The desire is a little different for me. I can still get up at the crack of dawn and or be on the river at crack of dawn and fish till the sun goes down a little after for steelhead and not catch a thing and be perfectly happy and ready for the next day. With the trout, I'm good after a couple hours. I'm an outdoor guy. I love being outside and I love nature. And I'm an avid birder. And I've kept life lists of all the birds I've seen and identified around the world since I was a little guy. And I'm just as passionate about that as I am fishing in many ways. So,
cool.
I do a lot of that as well. But when it's time to steelhead fish, I'm there.
I hear you. We've been talking a little bit about the, like the trout spay and some of that stuff that's kind of coming around the industry. And I know that that's interest. Is that something that you do a little bit to keep yourself busy out there with the kind of the smaller, lighter stuff? Or I guess,
Sure. I love we'll call it a spay cast, but the two-handed cast, the spay cast, if you will, a waterborne, cast that's independent of the water, and building the cast around the anchored fly on the water in a kind of aerialized roll cast, whatever you want to call it. I love that. I love casting. I love casting single hand. I love casting two hand. I find though that I utilize the two hand, the spay cast, in all sorts of ways. So for me, even to go out on the small mountain streams or even this middle Provo River, I might not always have a two-handed rod in my hand, but I utilize the cast, right? So to me, the size of the rod that I would use is relative to the size of the water. So to answer your question, yes. Mm-hmm. If I'm in trout water that's large enough and broad enough, and it makes sense to use one of the micro spays, one of the 3, 4, 5 weight two-handed spay rods, I certainly will, and I have for a very long time. Actually, long before it was even fashionable. It just makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, because you were doing it. Yeah, since 89, you picked up your first one. That was right at the beginning. I'm thinking back to Deschutes River, thinking back to some of the the guides and the work you were working on the Deschutes too, right?
I was in those years. I was on the Grand Ronde, and then I went to the Deschutes in '95. I mean, I fished the Deschutes, but I started guiding there in '95. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. But when I was on the Grand Ronde, when I went there in the 1990, there was like maybe nobody else using a two-handed rod up in the stretch I was in. And I remember even some of the locals, they would, I don't know why, but they were, nice guys, but it just bothered them that I was using this long rod on their river, and it didn't make any sense at all. And I just smiled, and pretty soon I taught them all one by one how to do it. Yep. And now, of course, you're the minority if you have a single-handed rod. So
yeah, exactly. Nice. So yeah, maybe you could talk a little bit about the a passion for steelhead and kind of how that all came to be and some of the other stuff. Yeah.
So a passion for steelhead. I started writing magazine articles as early as 1993, I believe. When Nick Amato of Frank Amato Publications came up to fish with us in Alaska. He spent a few days with me in the boat and guiding, and we were doing some kind of neat things with surface fishing for silver salmon. And he came up to check that out, namely with the WOG pattern, which you may have heard of. And in that time, I guess he took a liking to me and what I had to say, and just said, would I be interested in writing any magazine articles for him? I said, well, sure, that'd be great. So that started that, and I enjoyed that process and sharing information in that way, and I won't. I'm not too proud to say that it was kind of cool to see your name in print, and and then have a lot of positive response. There was no email back then and no social media, so you would get either people telling you that they enjoyed it, or you would get handwritten letters, or they would write letters to the magazines.
Sure.
Have little comment sections, and that was fun. So from there it just started, and I learned photography a little better, so I could have my own photos in the articles, and started working with Wild Steelhead and Atlantic Salmon Magazine, which Tom Pero was the editor of that and publisher in the very early 90s. Yeah, and I was thrilled when I got to do an article with that. And that just kind of snowballed, and all of a sudden I was doing articles for all the magazines and selling photographs to Sage and Sims and their shores and catalogs and Ross reels. Yeah. And all the while I'm just out having fun on the river, and I've got my camera with me, and it's on the brain 24/7. So to sit down and write about it was relatively easy. About the time I got out of guiding, full time. I'm still guide a little bit, but for steelhead, but full time 2003. Just prior to that, I had some friends say, "Man, you need to put all your knowledge and all your experiences in a book." And that's cool. I should do that sometime. And just thought about it mainly. And then about the time things changed in my life, I think Tom asked me about it, if he wanted to do this book. And I said, you know what, let's go for it. Well, it was a little trying because it happened during the time when I was trying to get to Utah. I was going through another divorce and just some heavy duty life stuff. Yeah. And all the while trying to make ends meet and get the firefighting job. And so it took a little bit of doing to get the time, not the discipline, but the time to sit down and write it. Well, pretty soon I did, and I got going on it, and it just poured out of me. I just shot from the hip, and I just decided that I'm going to write this book in such a way that if you're in my boat with me and I'm just talking to you about the day and about the water and about the river and about the fish and we kind of had to obviously organize it somewhat, but that's how I wrote it. And it came out, I'm proud to say it came out pretty good. I'm a little surprised that, when you're involved with this and you're writing it from the heart and the passion and you're working and you're getting up at 4 a.m. to write, and pretty soon it's 8 o'clock in the morning and it's time to start your day, and the time just went by. It seemed like 5 minutes. So you're so caught up in it and you're so involved in it. And then all of a sudden you're done writing. And this is the experience I had. And then I went, oh, man, I haven't said anything. This is the silliest thing I've ever written in my life. What have I said? I forgot about this and I forgot about that and all these various things. Yeah. And Tom had suggested we do which wasn't the case, obviously. I just had seen it too much. And had a little bit of insecurity, but Tom suggested we do a question and answer chapter in the book, which really be kind of neat and personalize it. Well, the questions came pouring in, and I addressed them. And when I started addressing these questions, it really did fill in those little areas where I thought that I had, I didn't things I didn't touch on. And when that was all done, I said, wow, okay, that's better. I've answered a lot of things, and it's a good chapter in the book.
Nice.
So then I'm all done with it, and I'm feeling the same thing again. So then it gets out in the public, and then all of the reviews start coming in, and the letters and the kind emails, and people just so excited about it. And one of my close friends, Scott O'Donnell, actually gave me one of the best, I guess you could say it's a compliment. When he saw me, he got this, you got to know Scott, when he had this look on his face. I said, what do you think of my book? And he had this look on his face like he's going to say something bad. I'm like, oh my gosh, what? And he goes, you know what's wrong? I'm going to tell you what's wrong with that book. And I'm like, oh, here we go. Scott's going to be critical of my book. He said, you didn't leave anything for the rest of us to say anything.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I went, wow. Nice. Coming from him, I think we did it. I think we covered everything I wanted to cover. And now many years later, when I'm teaching my clinics, this was a few years ago when the book was still relatively new. And I would talk about the book and during my clinics, and someone would have a question and I'd answer it, and I'd say, oh, and by the way, that's also in the book. And someone else would have a question. I said, and that's in the book.
Perfect.
Pretty soon I realized that hardly any question I was confronted with was not at least addressed in that book somewhere.
Nice. So. That's great. Yeah, it's pretty much it's the ultimate resource if you can just direct people back to that, and that's the way to go. Thank you. For sure. Nice work. Yeah, so I was going to check in with you on the whole Intruder revolution, or however you want to, people describe it. Maybe you can describe your perspective from, being in the industry, but, a little bit on the outside of that.
Yeah. So That's funny you say that, because that's also in the book. I write about that. It's in the book. Yeah. So I'm friends with Jerry French and Ed Ward from way back when, and we are actually we'd steelhead fish together a bunch, and it was, I believe, 1993. We are all three working still up at Katmai Lodge. In fact, Ed was my roommate that last year. And one morning, we always messing with flies, as you do. Flies are a big part of your life when you're fishing every day, and and keen observations, and just wanting, constantly learning and trying to create things and for various conditions, what have you. And one morning I woke to, like, I don't know, someone tapping my shoulder and kind of giggling, and I opened my eyes, and there's Ed standing over me with a fly hanging off of a leader, and he's dangling it in front of my face. And it's like nothing I'd ever seen. It was long and leggy, and there was just hackle all over it, and just it was alive. And I just woke up and I just chuckled, and I go, man, what the heck is that? And he goes, check this out. And it's, wow, that is crazy. This thing looks so buggy and alive. Right on, man. And he just said, yeah, Jerry called it an intruder. I said, oh, that's a perfect name for it. And, I thought it was neat. I didn't have to sit down and tie a bunch of them. I thought it was cool. And if Eddie's gonna go and find out what the intruder's all about in the water. Yeah. So sure enough, he did. And that, those very first intruders were tied just on a Alec Jackson size 1/2. Later came his addition of the trailer hook and kind of doing it shank style, if you will. But those guys being Jerry and Ed, and then also Scott Howell was working with us at the time up there. They all three got really excited about it and started working on it. And I know they all went up to the Tuskegee country that fall in '93, and they used nothing but intruder style. Yeah. And they caught a bunch of fish, and I know they had a great time, and the takes were really extra vicious, they thought, and the data they compiled was the takes were very vicious. Right. And I'll be honest with you, I thought it was really cool and really neat, but I was into my own thing at that time. So I never really jumped on it. I did after a while, and being close with Ed, they kept it very secret, of course, not with me. I got to see all kinds of intruders, and they kept getting bigger and bigger. In fact, they morphed into these amazing, huge, ginormous, for lack of a better word, fly. I remember Ed just saying, "Gosh, I'm addicted to it because the takes are so violent." and I talking to him about it one night. I realized, because he didn't know, he didn't really understand why the takes were violent. Was it big? Were they trying to kill it? And you know what I thought? He told me one day, he goes, I put these lead eyes on here. People think I'm trying to get it all deep. I only put the lead eyes on there to counteract the parachute effect of all the turkey that's on there, and all the there's a lot of turkey in those early intruders. The fly was fairly buoyant. It was resistant to sinking. So he just did that to counterbalance it. And he said, these flies are they're only a foot or two under the surface. And I went, that's why you get the violent takes, because you're getting these big fish, these big wild winter fish coming up high in the water column, taking that fly down. So you're getting a much bigger jarring take than you would if it was down at their level. So in any event, that was pretty interesting and revealing and Ed was pretty excited with that thought. After a while he started using the ostrich hurl in the flies. And although I wasn't intrigued to tie my own intruders, I did I did like the look of the ostrich. So I did some space style flies where I'd use ostrich herl as the hackle, and then in the wing. And I have a fly called the DC Prawn. It's in Passion for Steelhead that, and I definitely credit Ed's Intruder to that, but I never really got too into it. I can say this though, anytime that I did not an actual intruder on, it was always one Ed tied, and always something cool happened.
Nice. No,
so I think it's really neat, and I will in the Passion for Steelhead. What I said about that fly is that it's not many things are original anymore.
Yeah.
That was something that is original. That changed the face of a lot of people's idea of steelhead flies, the size of flies, the styles, and it just. Ed is truly, and you can credit those other guys to a degree, but it's Ed.
Yeah. Well, that was the take from the story I heard. It sounds like, Ed was the guy watching the National Geographic sort of things with coming up with these ideas. But was it, I was just thinking this as you were talking. I mean, is the revolution similar to the whole spey rod, two-handed rod revolution back in the 90s when you were there starting that whole thing or being part of that?
Similar as regards to, I don't understand the question.
Yeah, is it similar like when you started fishing the two-handed rods, people thought you were crazy.
Oh, yeah.
And when Ed was doing that, so I guess they didn't think he was crazy because he was hooking fish, right? People realized
he was hooking fish, and Ed's always been a mysterious character, and and Ed's hooking fish, and people listen, right?
Yeah, totally.
So and he kept that secret for quite a while.
Yeah.
And then when it got revealed, it was very attractive to a lot of people. Very attractive. So they started tying it. Now, one thing that I do, and this is important to me, and I'm sure it is to Ed and other, peers of mine. How you take a brand name and then it becomes the name, like Kleenex, tissue, and we call it a Kleenex. Well, Kleenex is a brand name. That kind of happens with a few things. The Intruder being one. Spey flies and intruders.
Yeah, that's true.
Everything, all of a sudden, every steelhead fly became a spey fly, which is not true.
No.
And then anything that was big is called an intruder. And intruders it's a family of flies. It's not a specific pattern.
Yeah.
But it's got to meet some criteria, certain criteria, to be actually called an intruder. So, and I've seen guys, fairly new to the sport and that don't understand the history of it, calling a great big rabbit strip leech with a hackle in front of it an intruder.
Right. No.
You get my point. So whoever's listening, an intruder's an intruder, and do your research and find out what it is before you start calling a big fly an intruder.
Totally. Yeah. And if as similar to yours as it's in the book, and I've had a few guests that it's in the podcast. I've had a few people that have clarified that exact thing, that it's the background on it and stuff. And you're right on. So no, I appreciate that. Yeah. So I was going to jump into a little bit on presenting the fly, at the right speed, because that's a big common question a lot of people have. Before I get into that, that's kind of a big topic. I was hoping you could maybe clarify a little bit on your, was this your second book or the most recent book that came out? Or
for the Amatos, I did, as far as the book goes, I did one of those Steelhead River journals on the Skagit and Sauk River, and I believe it was published in 1996.
Okay.
So for me, that was a book project. It wasn't a very big book, but it was a lot bigger than a magazine article. So it's like 50-page book. Yeah. And then I did Passion for Steelhead. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. And so the most recent book that just came out, the Tying Flies with Style. There was a little bit of a social media blast, or however you want to call it, where I think you came out and some other people talking about how there were some issues and how not to buy the book and stuff. I was hoping, I had Tom Pero on here in a recent podcast, and he explained kind of being the publisher and all that, basically his side of the story. I was hoping that you can maybe clarify your side as well and just go a little bit in the background, just so people, I think it's a good lesson, if nothing else, for people that want to get into this and write and to understand the process and all that.
Sure. That's it's a sensitive subject, and it's actually more than just a little social media thing.
Yeah.
I've been very quiet about it. I can tell you that it's been a gut-wrenching, very sad ordeal. And I know that Mr. Pero has been very vocal about it on your podcast, and then the paper, this long paper he wrote. Right. For those of you that don't know, we'll talk a little bit about it, because I kind of do want to tell my side of the story, because there's two sides to every story.
Yep.
And I've been giving it a lot of thought, because I figured we might be talking about this.
For sure.
And I want to be careful, because I don't want to drag it on.
Yep.
And I never had any intention of trying to slander or defame Wild River Press or Mr. Tom Pero himself. I never have said anything derogatory, and I'm not going to. All I'm going to do is tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Perfect. Which we haven't always had the truth.
Well, and I'll just interrupt you real quick, just how I got involved in this. I think I talked to you quite a while, because you were one of my number one people I've been wanting to get on the show since I started this. And
sure.
In that time, I think I listened to April. I listened to April's podcast. And I heard Tom on it, and it's like, whenever I hear a great, a good guest, I always, sometimes reach out and stuff. So that's kind of how that came. And I worked Tom, and I think in that time, by the time I got Tom on, I had heard this social media thing, and that's why I asked Tom the question. So now we're kind of full circle, and you're on here to talk a little bit about it. So
all right, well, I will. The first thing is I had the idea of doing my second book. I'll be honest, after doing A Passion for Steelhead, it took a ton out of me, and when it was done, I was done. I did not want to look at another piece of typing on a computer or any of that for a while. It was a great experience, but I needed a break. So my break was up, and I started thinking about my next project, and I want to do a fly tying book. I'm in Utah, and my brother-in-law, Marty Howard, who is just an absolutely superb fly tyer and an absolute peer in the fly fishing. He's a long history of being a professional in the industry as well. So, and a wonderful fly tyer and steelheader. So we decided to do this together, and we started playing around with some photography and trying to really, really photograph flies well. And I had a few photos that I had done, and I had visited with Tom Pero on one of my casting clinic trips up to Washington, 2010 or 11. And I showed him some of these photos. And I heard in his podcast, he said that they were Marty's photos of step-by-step, but right. They weren't. They were my own photos.
Okay.
And there was no step-by-step photos. They were a style that you will soon see. Anyway, that doesn't matter.
Gotcha.
And we started talking about doing this book, and he said, yeah, great. Now, I want you guys to keep in mind, when I say you guys, all your listenership, that when we did A Passion for Steelhead and Wild River Press was just kind of getting launched, they sold their books in a very traditional manner, in that they sold them wholesale. And the big book distributorships like Angler's Book Supply and Rumpf and Sons, and they Wild River Press would sell to them, and then they would distribute them to any fly shop or retail outlet that wanted to buy these things. Right? That's right. The way it works. Well, over time, Wild River Press decided that they didn't want to do it that way, and they wanted to cut out middlemen and distributorships and Amazons and all that. And that's great. That's their prerogative. Mm-hmm. But in doing so, they cut out all the fly shops.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. So Wild River Press, and I see a lot of people don't even know this today. If you want a book by Wild River Press, you go to wildriverpress.com and you purchase the book. So Wild River Press is the sole retail outlet.
Right. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. And you can decide how you want.
And actually, I did realize that recently when I did. I was looking up your books or some books, kind of with the Wild River Press now, and I kind of went to Amazon just because that's a really easy place to find everything. And it was like, and you couldn't find them there. Yeah, that was my first time. I was like, whoa, they're not there. They must be all through the publisher.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, okay. And you can't buy them in a fly shop.
Gotcha.
Period. Yeah. So I had expressed to Tom that I was not interested in that. The fly shops are my friend, and they're part of my business, and it's a very small little industry, and it's pretty close knit. So there's no way that, sorry to speak in the third person, but there's no way that Dec Hogan is going to turn his back on fly shops. Sure. If I have a product, they're allowed to get it. So I discussed that with Tom, and he agreed that my fly tying book, or our fly tying book, was going to be available in fly shops. Done. So Marty and I went to work, and Tom and his layout guy, Greg Smith, they didn't have anything come their way. It was Marty back in 2011. Marty and I just kept working on the book at our own pace. Didn't sign any contracts or anything, just at our own pace. Mm-hmm. Well, Marty at the time was a police officer, full-time police officer for Park City. And he was working swing shifts. So we were able to work during the day. And we worked and worked and worked and worked. And then all of a sudden he had to change shifts. Well, we weren't able to work together anymore. So the project kind of went away, which is, here's an opportunity for me to interject this. The publisher of Wild River Press states verbally on your show and in his defense, I guess you would say, his 22-page white paper, he claims that Marty and I had a disagreement or a series of disagreements, and that he even called it a family feud. Right. That is an absolute downright lie. Yeah. Marty and I are brothers, and we never had any kind of, I have no idea where that came from. What really happened was Marty changed shifts and we just went on with life. So a few years later, we said, we have all this wonderful work done, and let's revive it. And, because Marty retired. Oh, wow. And I'm a full-time firefighter, so I have 2 days on, 4 days off. And when I'm not traveling around teaching casting, I have 4 days off to write and do things fishing related. So we revived it, and we certainly did speak with Tom. I don't know if he called us. He said he did, or I called him. It doesn't even matter. Mm-hmm. We were ready to work again. And this was last May. And we set up a 3-way conference call with myself, Tom Pero, and Marty Howard, the two authors and the would-be publisher. Mm-hmm. In that conversation, before we really made any plans or outlines to move forward, I distinctly remember the conversation. I said to Tom, and Marty was there, said, we have to know that this fly tying book is going to be available in fly shops. And yes, we certainly had a lot of work to do on this yet. It wasn't by any means complete. We're going to work. Right. And, I know Tom in your podcast said, well, they didn't even have a book. Well, I don't know what that means. We were working on the book. Tom didn't have a book either. So in any event, he agreed with the two of us that this book would be available in fly shops and be sold in a more traditional wholesale manner. Now I need you to keep in mind that Marty and I would have never, ever gone with Wild River Press had we thought for a second that they were going to be the sole retailer and that they were going to not make this book available in fly shops and other retail outlets. Right. This is a huge part of the story. Tom agreed to it. Did we get anything in writing at that point? No. Why would I? I didn't tell you this. Oh, I did. I alluded to it earlier. I've been working with Tom Pero since the early 1990s. and did every magazine he ever had. I wrote articles for, and I had a column in one of them, a monthly column, bi-monthly. We traveled together. We did casting clinics around the East Coast and upstate New York.
You guys were friends.
We were friends. Yeah. So why would I not trust this?
Right.
So we happily went to work, and yes, we were working with Tom and Greg as our publisher, and back and forth, and editing things and sending them material, and Greg's laying the book out, and we still hadn't signed anything. Again, didn't think we needed to. And Tom kept pushing for us to get this thing done, and life's hard. Marty's retired. He made it sound like, I didn't do any of the work. Well, I did. Yeah. I certainly did. Maybe not as swiftly as he wanted to, but I got it all in. In any event, it's the end of December, and we're getting close. We still had a lot to do, but we're getting close. And all of the step-by-step photographs and stories that accompany them are in, and Greg's got them. And that's about all. There was a lot more to the book than he had. And all of a sudden it comes out that Wild River Press is in fact going to be the sole retail outlet.
Yeah.
And not even allow us to have the books wholesale. Authors should usually get their books at wholesale, and I can sell them out of the back of my truck all day long if I want to, like I did Passion for Steelhead. And go to book signings at fly shops, and
yep.
So he lets it be known. Well, the wheels started falling off a little bit, and we started working some things out. The details here don't matter. Just that Tom was willing to bend on a couple of items. One of which was he was going to allow us to buy a few books at a special discounted price that Wild River Press usually doesn't do, so we could sell them at some of our public events. And then I said, oh gosh, the whole fly shop thing was a bummer, but we were willing not to, we'd come so far, and we've spent so much time doing this. Tom talks about the time that him and Greg spent doing the book is minimal compared to what we did. Obviously, it's our book. We're doing the work. So, we have that vested, and we just said, okay, we'll work with you. So, but Tom, we need contracts now. Yeah. This raised our eyebrows. We need contracts now. And it was hard to swallow. So he immediately revised his contracts to allow some concessions for us, and sent them to us. We got the contracts, and when we read the contracts, it raised a lot of questions. And so we presented him very diplomatically and in the adult big boy world, and presented him with these questions, of which he ignored us. Now, when I deal with Tom Pero and I send him an email, I usually get a response. It's pretty amazing, actually, within 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Now 4 days, like for years. Now 4 days go by with nothing.
Oh yeah.
So I ask him about it, and he comes back with a kind of derogatory, condescending note to us that kind of made us a bit upset. Not kind of, it did.
Yep.
And we let him know, and we're very unhappy and thought maybe this isn't going to work out. And nothing inflammatory. Well, Tom goes into hiding, and he won't talk to us. It's all in this, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
He won't talk to us. He goes into hiding and says that he can't deal with us now, and he'll talk to us at the end of the month, which as a friend, I could not believe that. I had a really hard time with what's wrong. What's wrong? I don't understand this. This is hard to comprehend. We're adults here,
right?
And we were willing to work with him, and he shut us down. So the whole month of January goes by, and we don't hear from him. And I've left him phone messages, I've written him emails, and we don't hear from him. So we decide to say, well, I guess we're not doing the project. I tried to reach out to Greg Smith, and he won't answer me either. So I thought, well, these guys are done. So we went and found another publisher.
No kidding.
Yeah, because we want to finish this book. We just poured so much time into it over the course of the last year and then some. It was Stackpole Books, and there's some misunderstanding here as well. We told them they knew about us with Wild River Press, and we told them that the project was over. Tom claims that I said that Tom gave us his blessing to move on, which I never did. I don't know where that came from.
Right.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And then another month goes by, and so 2 solid months have gone by. We have not heard from Tom, and we're working with Stackpole, and they sent us this wonderful contract that was easy to sign, and we signed it. And incidentally, I did emphasize we did not sign a contract with Wild River Press at all. And as far as any agreements we had was all verbal, and then he reneged on it. So there you go. Yeah. So 2 solid months go by, and all of a sudden there is the release of Tying Steelhead Flies with Style.
Wow!
And if you don't think
Jeez.
That was like walking into your home after burglars had been there and stolen everything in your house, the feeling that came from that, it was unbelievable. And I'm just and Marty, I keep saying I let me emphasize, it's Marty and I, all of this.
Oh yeah.
We're just shocked. We're stunned. We can't believe it. And what would they use? Of course we had given them some material, but there was so much to be done. And we didn't even believe that there was a book. Now, if you had that feeling, wouldn't you just, you'd go crazy and you'd have to stop it. So I'm sorry, but I want to read something to you.
Yeah.
And here was our reaction. First of all, my very first reaction, because I was panicked. I could not believe it.
Right.
I grabbed the phone to call Tom. And I'm going to ask Tom, what's going on? And instead, I get his voicemail, and I am absolutely enraged, and I'm not ashamed to say it. And yes, I left him a pretty inflammatory voicemail.
Right.
Hung up the phone. I called Greg Smith to talk to him. His wife answered, and I said, have a nice night, and I hung up the phone. Immediately, Marty emails Tom. I email Tom, and we want to stop the presses. Yeah. So Marty writes up this quick thing. He sends it to me. We switched our names so we could each post it. Now I'm going to read this to you because until today, this is the only thing that I've said publicly. I have not said anything derogatory about Tom Pero or Wild River Press. I have not done anything to try and destroy him or his business, as he claims. I'm going to read this to you.
Yeah.
This was on Facebook and Instagram that very night, the minutes after we learned that this book had been published behind our backs. Mm-hmm. Please read. So sorry. Wild River Press announced today the release of our book and is now accepting pre-orders. Marty and I dropped Wild River Press at the end of 2017 because we were not able to come to an agreeable business arrangement. I can't even say what the finished book looks like because we never completed the project. Please do not order the book. I don't even know if the book actually exists. It's a very sad day for both Marty and I. All we want to do is provide the fly fishing community with fun fly tying instruction. I am sure there is a lesson to be learned, but I can say straight up, this is painful. So please spread this. I don't want to see anyone get taken. Please share this. Mm-hmm. There's nothing, I don't say anything bad about Tom Pero and Wild River Press in that.
No.
Do I?
No, and that was the first time I think that I heard about it, and it just kind of was like, yeah, and I mean, I didn't know you that well at all, really, but it was kind of, it was definitely a passionate, reading it you right away, sure. You're like, okay, something is going crazy.
Something's up.
Yeah, you just wanted to help the situation,
Sure, I did, and we were just dumbfounded. And first of all, and I didn't even preface by saying this, and I want to. I hate being in this situation. I hate it that I am talking about this right now. That it even is. It's been a really, really challenging few months since this happened. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. And I have, so first back to that initial post, what happened next, was pretty amazing. People, they only had that information, and in defense of Tom and the few bad things that were said, threatening things and kind of some ugliness. I don't condone that. I also know that people are passionate, and they only had a little bit of information, and they like Marty and I, and they probably had a cocktail at night and were enraged and needed to vent some steam about something. But it sounds like in the previous podcast with Wild River Press that there was just this constant barrage of people saying negative things and threatening him. There was really only two. Okay. And I actually happened to know the guys out of the hundreds and hundreds of responses and shares. I only knew a few of those people. And thank you for all the support. Yeah. But it wasn't as bad as he made it sound, although, and those guys regret doing it. And it's true, like I said, a cocktail in the evening. And so go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, out of the whole story, it seems to me like, anybody in this industry, I think a lot of people on the outside might not know it, but on the inside, you realize, how small it is and how tight-knit group, and especially with the shops, there's a whole revolution of online shopping, and that's hurting, the local, and it's all about trying to back up the shop. So, that's the interesting thing that we all know that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So,
and it's like I said, it's important for me to support the fly shops and everyone involved. And again, I don't fault Wild River Press for wanting to do business the way they want to do business. I'm fine with that. I just don't want to be a part of it.
Gotcha.
There's a couple of things. Go ahead.
What I was going to say, so what do you think, just for a little take-home message for maybe somebody that's going to be writing a fly fishing book someday? What would be a word of advice from this story or something they could learn, do you think?
As I get older, I've had a couple bad experiences this year. One of which was in Alberta this year. I had in my 55 years, I have two of the worst things that ever happened to me. I was on a family vacation in Alberta this year and had my brand new Toyota 4Runner and a U-Haul trailer full of all of our adventure gear stolen.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. And that just really changed me. Yeah, it's horrible. That's a long movie. And then now this thing with Wild River Press, and I have to be honest with you, the feeling that I have over the Wild River Press thing is the same, and if not worse, because now I know who did this to us. And he may feel justified, but when you do a book, there's a whole process that happens, and we were. A big part of that was cut out, and back and forth and proofreading and placement, and there was a lot more material that this book needed to have. Mm-hmm. And it was published in haste, and I never intend to come on here and badmouth anybody, just the truth. We established that, and here's the truth. That book is not representation of what Wild River Press can do. It's missing all sorts of things. You don't even have to know. If you just know books, it's missing things. But here's the biggest problem. It's full of typos.
Oh, really?
It's full of redundant words. It's full of repeated photographs. Yes. Yeah. It was, I don't understand it. And as far as Marty and I are concerned, that book does not exist. It was not handled. It was not handled the right way. So I'm going to right here, once again say, please don't buy that book. And I can just tell you that we'll make it up to you. And soon, someday, you'll see what Marty and I really wanted to bring to the fishing public. and with our hearts and passion. And I don't care if I make a nickel. I like sharing the information with our wonderful community. So
yeah, okay. So there you go. So maybe there'll be some more stuff down the line on this. And for me, I think maybe one take home message is maybe a life message for everybody is that God, whether it's your car getting stolen, which has happened to me before as well, or this, I mean, stuff's going to happen that's terrible in life. And a big part is being able to move on and build from it and learn, and I guess, continue growing. And, but, And
I apologize. I didn't answer your question. The question to aspiring writers is for sure is to, I was kind of leading into being cynical now, you can't do anything on a handshake. You can't do anything with a verbal agreement. You have to have everything in writing and signed, and agreed upon, legally and officially before you dive in. Yeah. No matter what.
Yep.
And Tom, and I'll say this to you, Tom, Mr. Pero, my old friend, in your 22-page white letter, which, I'm just like Tom. I encourage you to go read it if you want. It's tabloid journalism at its best, by the way, and it's full of smoke and mirrors and downright lies. And, in a different venue, I could actually prove it. But in any event, in the end of the story, he says, here's what I've learned. Well, it takes him many, many sentences to say what he learned, when really what Tom should have learned is the same thing that I did learn. And that is that you have to have a written, signed agreement up front. Right. End of story.
Yep.
There's no other way around it.
Yep.
So there you have it. And I apologize to everybody for taking so long to tell this, and that it even is. I'm all about fishing, love, life, passion, and all of you. Anybody that knows me knows that first and foremost, I love people and I love sharing. And that's what I'm all about. I have no hidden agenda, and to be called dishonest and unethical which that was said about me, is like, calling Pablo Picasso paint by number artist.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. I alluded that I was a Boy Scout. I was in the Navy. I am a public servant my whole life, guiding, and now I'm a firefighter, emergency medical technician for the last 13 years. Marty Howard is a retired police officer of 30 years. We're pretty honest guys with lots of integrity. So I guess that's enough about that. Let's talk about fishing.
Yeah. No, that's good. I'm glad you clarified that. Yeah. So let's bring it back to that question I alluded to a little while ago on presenting your fly. And actually, I think I usually try to keep these shows to, we're going to go a little over definitely, our normal time, but that's fine. But maybe we'll just do a little bit of a rapid fire round to try to get through a few questions.
And I'll try not to be so wordy.
Yeah, no, totally. So as far as presenting a fly, how would you tell somebody who's struggling to understand how to present that fly to a steelhead? How would you explain it to them?
Okay. So there's many various factors, but when you swing a fly, the bottom line is you need to swing that fly just as a baseline. You need to swing that fly as slowly as possible. Slow is good. Overall, I know that, when Tom Larimer talked about speeding the fly up, in those conditions, that's a rare, unique condition. But if Tom came fishing with me tomorrow on the Skeena River for spring steelhead, we'd be out there fishing those flies slow. Slow down and across, so slow, as slow as you can. It's got to be enticing. What you want to do in the world, according to me, is you want your fly to look vulnerable.
Yeah.
That's
right.
Yeah,
that's right. Because the steelhead are sitting there. They're either, it's a prey item. I mean, that's definitely one thing, or they're just kind of interested. I mean, what do you think is the biggest reaction?
I think it's a conditioned response. a latent feeding response from the ocean, and a reaction. If you were standing on the other side if we were together in the room and I just tossed my car keys at you, you wouldn't just stand there and let them hit you. You'd try and catch them.
Yep.
Or bat it out of the way because
Totally.
it might have been a tarantula, but you're not going to just stand there, right? You're going to do something. And that's a conditioned response in you.
Yeah.
So that's without getting way into it. I've spent many a late night, 3 hour over a scotch or 7 talking about this stuff with my buds. But yeah.
Cool. All right. So what's your favorite beverage on the river?
On the river itself?
Yeah. You're out steelhead fishing and you're
after or during?
After.
Yeah, after. I think my very favorite liquid after I'm done fishing is Lagavulin. It's a Isla Scotch.
Oh, okay.
It's a heavy, smoky,
cool.
peaty Scotch. Yeah, that's how I like it.
Nice. That's cool. Yeah, I'm kind of a full IPA sort of beer sort of guy. So, I love IPAs too, and double IPAs and exactly. Good stuff. So what's up with you have an upcoming steelhead class? I think you mentioned in somewhere, right? Coming up here soon.
Yeah. So I have my it's concert season for me. It's like I go on my tour. Yeah. So the first one, usually by now I've done several. This year I'm starting a little later. So I will be out of Royal Treatment Fly Shop in West Lynn, Oregon, the 5th and the 6th of May, doing my on the water casting fishing clinics. And I don't know if there's spots open in there or not. There might be a couple opens on the second day still. You can check with them at Royal Treatment Fly Shop.com. Okay. And then after that, I'll be at Peninsula Outfitters just 2 weeks later, or 2 weeks later, in the weekend of the 18, 19, or 19, 20 of May in Paulsbo, Washington. And there I'll be doing on Saturday a all-day fly tying class, tie along. And I know there's probably a spot or two open there. You can check with them. And then on Sunday I'll be doing the casting class again. I think that class is booked. There might be one spot open, but that's Peninsula Outfitters. Then the next month I'm on Avid Angler Fly Shop in north of Seattle. I don't know what exact town they're in.
Is there any way to if somebody runs into this a year or two down the line and you're still out there doing stuff, to like go someplace to see what all you have coming routinely, or are you just kind of
sometimes my affiliation, it changes, but sometimes there's a calendar on. I've worked closely with Ray Jeff Sports and Echo Fly Rods and Airflow Fly Lines. Sometimes their calendar will have my lineup on there.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And I'm not really super great at having a website and announcing all these things, but that's in the works.
Yep. Yeah, that'll be there. Well,
if you keep checking Instagram and Facebook, I almost always post it a month or two prior to the event.
Okay, they'll find you here. And then I'll at wetflyswing.com/Dec, I'll have all the show notes for the stuff we talked about today, and in a place to get a hold of you, at least with your Instagram and stuff. So cool. And as far as flies, I always have to ask the fly question. You've got one or two flies to use for steelhead. Do you have a couple patterns to throw out there?
Yeah, so probably, I know all my buddies, my peers in this, and you've talked to them all, and we probably all pretty much have the same answer, and that my answer is the fly is the most important, least important component. So it's important because you have to have one. Yeah. And then there's certainly parameters with which, conditions with which you tie these offerings. But if I had to just narrow down to two flies in winter type conditions, I love my Skagit Mist. But you could replace that Skagit Mist with a big old purple marabou. Yeah. Right?
Exactly.
And just go fish it.
Yeah.
I like the Skagit Mist because it's got a little bit of finesse and style and some classic lines, but it's full of all my favorite steelhead colors, and It's got some movement to it, and that's if you said, Dec, all you ever get to fish for the rest of your winter steelhead is a Skagit miss, I'd say let's go fishing.
Nice.
Yeah. And then for more summer conditions and Columbia River Basin conditions, you can't go wrong with just a wet fly with a purple body, a white wing, and hackle on a tail, whatever you want to call it. But if you said, Dec, all you get is a green butt skunk, I'd be bummed that it was a green butt skunk, because they're just they're wonderful, wonderful fly. But it's just so common, But if that's all I had, I'd say let's go fishing. And then, in fact, if you replace that with a muddler, that'd be fine too. So there you go.
Cool. Yep. All right. And what about maybe a steelhead tip? If you had to boil all your knowledge down into one big tip for somebody that, I guess maybe either going for summers or winters, do you have one that you tell people a lot?
So there's the obvious. It is such a mental game. So, I would always say stick to it. Don't change your flies. Don't question what you're doing. The angle of the dangle, as I say, is more important. You want to fish that fly slow and keep it in the water. But you need to be observant. You need to be observant, and you'll find when you step into a steelhead run, if you cover the whole thing from top to bottom and really be thorough, you'll start to learn a lot. And I guess that'd be my best advice. But over time, you'll find out that the speed of the water that the fish takes in, whether it's a tail out, a riffly head, or the meat of the run, there's a certain constant in the holding areas, a certain speed in the holding areas where they actually take the fly, not the surface currents.
Yeah.
If you're observant and you start to learn that and feel that, and that's something you want to key in on.
Yeah.
But mainly just try and be persistent, and don't worry too much about your fly and your line.
Yep, totally. Okay, and how about we talked about a few people here in the show, but are you more type had a few big mentors, or did you do all this on your own getting started? or throughout?
Most people do it on their own. I did it on my own. I would say there were people that I looked up to and observed and watched carefully, and when they spoke, I listened. I would see Harry Lemire on the river, and I wasn't so eager as a young dude. I wouldn't run up and tell him what I knew and what I did. I was very humble and listened. That's a smart thing to do. I've been in rooms where some guys they're talking more than me and Ed are, and it's this time of life, and where that young guy is, he might want to listen to us. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, Harry Lemire, Bill McMillan, and Charlie Gearhart. My two mentors.
Nice.
And none of them took me by the hand. Again, I just observed and watched them and tried to emulate what they were doing. And then my buddies, just Scott O'Donnell and Ed Ward and even Marty Howard. We and Jerry French. We just swap and share information, and I have nothing. Even though we all started around the same time and grew up in this together, we all had tremendous respect for one another.
Yeah, totally. And
still do.
Yeah, totally. Can you leave us with maybe a memorable fish story or some other big story from you said you're 55 years old. You've got how many years you got now? If you look at it, I mean, you've been doing this a while since you were a kid, but how long have you been on the guiding? Did you do the guiding thing and just been in the industry?
Like I said, I did my first, spoke at a fly fishing club, probably in 1986 or 7. I was still in the Navy, so that was kind of the first thing I did.
Sure, so you got 30 good years.
People were listening, and then 89, like I said, was my first guide trip. So yeah, probably 30 something years now.
Yeah, so
blink of an eye. So I've had a lot of wonderful, amazing fish to my own rod. I've seen some amazing, you can imagine, things in my guiding days. As far as just a mean hot fish to my own rod, It's in the book. The Dean River in British Columbia, down in the lower Dean, where they're right out of the tide, and those fish are extra strong anyway. Huh. We've all had, where maybe not all of us, but where a fish is running downstream, and then you see a fish straight across from you jumping, and that's your fish. That's your fish. Yeah. Well, that's always neat. But this happened on a much larger scale. It's a big, broad area of the river. I don't know. It's more than 100 yards across there, maybe 100 yards. So the fish is way into my backing going downstream. And I see this thing out of the corner of my eye straight across from me. Only it's not in the water. It's up on the bank.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. So it's on the bank flopping. It's the whole Dean River is on my fly line.
That's crazy.
Just flopped. Yeah, that was nuts. And then it goes on from there. I mean, blow by blow accounts of a steelhead fight are special, but we know what happens. They run, they jump, they jump, they run, they run, they jump. But that was probably the most amazing thing I ever saw. And what really was interesting is when I actually landed the fish, I couldn't believe it. I had to pull out every fish fighting skill I had and ability and stamina. The fish didn't really mark itself up too bad up on that bank. Okay. So that was nice. Yeah.
Wow.
They're hard as steel.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I think we were about there. I wanted to check in with you to see maybe in the next 6 months or so if you have anything you want to leave everybody off with to keep in touch, or just any new things coming up we can be on the lookout for. Yeah.
Well, like I said, I'm not going to reveal what it is, but there's a little surprise coming.
All right.
There's a little surprise coming, and I can assure you that you'll all hear about it. So,
perfect.
In the meantime, I want to thank you, and I make no apologies, but I'm sorry that I was in this situation, and then that for a portion of this podcast was devoted to something less than beautiful.
Right.
And I'm all about beautiful. So sorry about that.
No, I think it was something.
It needed to be said from my perspective. And
exactly.
Not even perspective. There's, the truth.
Totally. No, I appreciate you coming on and, telling your side of the story. And I think a lot of people will definitely learn from this. So I appreciate that.
Cool.
Awesome, Dec. Well, I just want to thank you for coming on. I think, hopefully maybe down the line when we keep going, I can get you back on to ask you some more questions about stuff. But
hey, I'd love to. It'd be fun to come on and just talk nothing but fishing.
All right, good stuff. Well, I'll keep in touch, and I'll put some links for some of this stuff and where folks can connect with you and some of the stuff we talked about. So we'll hopefully talk to you soon, and we'll see you then.
To everybody listening, hey, have a great time on the water and be safe and just have a great time. It's a beautiful life, and there's a lot of wonderful opportunity out there in nature. So go get it and have fun.
Nice. Thanks, Dec.
Thank you. Bye.
So there you go. If you want to find all the show notes with all the links we covered in this episode, just go to wetflyswing.com/20. If you get a chance, head on over to wetflyswing.com/review to leave us a quick review. I believe this will help others find the show, I think, and hopefully help some people get into their first steelhead. Thanks again for stopping by to check out the show today. I'm looking forward to catching up with you soon, and maybe even seeing you online or on the river. Later.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com. And if you found this episode helpful, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes.